Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
And it's 5:07 on a Thursday morning in your nation's capital, and this is the day. This is it. The debate is scheduled for tonight. Am I allowed to say that I still don't think it's going to happen? I don't. Something's going to happen. We'll see. But we're preparing for it, and we'll give you a full debate preview today, of course. And if you want to hear the debate, you'll hear it right here on WMAL, every second of it, so you don't have to go anywhere else. Don't give CNN your ratings. Keep it here on WMAL. Coming up at 7:05, Mark Chenoweth, president of New Civil Liberties Alliance. He was on the good side of yesterday's Supreme Court ruling that, took the side of the government over your rights in the First Amendment. He went down yesterday, sadly in defeat, but he's going to tell us exactly all about this case that could have far-reaching impacts in terms of the power of the government to censor American citizens and not have any repercussions. At 7:35, former Trump Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, and then at 8:05, K.T. McFarland. And joining us this morning, it's been a while since she's been in studio. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it out loud, but I'll say it. Have you ever had a crush on one of your friends' wives? Well, that's the case here. I do. I'll be honest. I have a crush on Bethany Mandel, and it's safe because I'm friends with her husband, Seth. She's got 6 kids, and she's certainly not interested in me. Bethany, good morning. Thanks for being here. I started it out awkward. I started awkward. I don't believe it.
I only agreed to wake up at, what time did I wake up? 3:30? Because I wanted to have a captive audience of you for 4 hours.
You know that I hang on every one of your words.
I love you. And so this is how I force you to hang out with me. It's like, did you ever play The Sims when you were a kid?
Yeah, of course.
You weren't a kid, you were older.
Yeah.
But you get the bar of like friendship up if you make someone spend enough time with you. And that's what
right.
This is. It's like a work life.
Oh. Trust me, we are better. And it's not like you are unfamiliar to our audience because we've had you on as a guest quite a bit over the last couple of years.
I used to guest co-host much more frequently, and now we will be doing that again, by the way.
Well, I was going to say, the last time you were in studio guest hosting, then you suddenly got pregnant, and I just want to be clear, that had nothing to do with the studio or anyone who works at WMAL, but you did. And then you had your latest baby. But it's been a while. I mean,
person who found out I was pregnant because I was like, please don't make fun of me for eating animal crackers at 6 a.m.
You were eating during breaks, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're. Usually, though, I mean, listen, this is, I think, your 6th child, right?
Yeah.
And your children have never sort of been you homeschool. You've got your kids around you all the time. It's very fun when we see you do a media hit, and one of them sort of makes noise in the background. But you found it hard to come into studio and be with us. And that's surprising, though, because in the past you've been able to sort of sneak away, and Seth is very hands-on. So why has it been such a delay?
So I know that this might come as news to you and maybe a surprise, but this is actually pretty early. And I know, it's kind of difficult. And my 6th baby is, we determined what on FCC regulations I could say before we went on air. Yeah. He's not considerate. He did not sleep. He didn't get a memo.
I believe the term you used is "my baby is an a-hole." That's what you said, and I'm not going to let you weasel out of it. You're calling your beautiful, innocent little child an a-hole.
So cute. I'll text you a picture. He is so cute, and oh my God, I gave him a haircut yesterday. It was the worst thing I've ever done.
You're not supposed to cut your hair's kid until they're like 10.
No, his hair kept on getting in his face, and it was annoying him, so I chopped his hair off, and I didn't tell Seth. And Seth is doing wake up in the morning in an hour and a half.
So it'll be a surprise to him. He's going to wake up his kid and he's going to look like Mo from the Three Stooges.
Yes, that's exactly what he looks like. And so I told my kids, I was like, don't tell your dad, see if he notices, pick the baby up out of the crib. And then he's like, oh my God, what happened to this baby? That's what I did to him. I'm terrible.
That's fantastic. So if we hear a scream of an anguished man from Montgomery County, we'll know. And speaking of Montgomery County, I mean, part of your last year has been your effort to run for the Board of Education in Montgomery County, where you fell short, but you did get a lot of issues out there and a lot of discussions had.
So that was the other reason I couldn't come on, because then you would have had to give my opponent 4 hours.
Although I would have loved that, to be honest. I mean,
I
have a lot of questions for your opponent in the Montgomery County School Board.
Me too. And unfortunately, the voters. So in Montgomery County, it works that anyone can vote for specific districts. So the two individuals who are running in District 4, I don't know. I mean, if I know who I'm voting for because it's the least worst of the really, really awful options, and I feel terrible for Montgomery County voters facing that choice, which is why I ran. I couldn't.
Which is
not
worse,
offer a choice.
Their insistence to push gay porn or any kind of porn for that matter and sexually explicit educational materials on young children against their parents' will, or they're cozying up to anti-Semitic Hamas terrorists. Which I mean, you got to do a coin flip. Which is worse?
So, I mean, you know what I honest to God think is the worst is the fact that the kids can't read and can't do math on grade level.
That's fair enough.
Honestly,
too.
like that, I really, people sort of saw me as like the culture warrior candidate. And for sure, I mean, that was definitely part of it. I don't think that parents should be ignored. I actually, during one of the debates, I made Lynn Harris tear up a little bit because I put her on the spot in a way that she had never, I think, experienced. She said during one of the debates, you know, parents are so important. We're all partners. I care about them. And I pulled up my phone and I was like, this is what you said during a school board meeting. That's the opposite of caring about parents. That's the opposite of thinking that, you know, this is a partnership between school and parents. And so making her like pretty much cry was definitely a highlight of the campaign. But I wanted to give Montgomery County voters a choice. And I don't know if you can say this, but like I came impressively close in my losing.
Of course.
It was a three-way race, and before the mail-ins, I was within less than half a percentage point of the incumbent.
I remember checking that night. I remember and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Because I talked to you offline, and you said, "Listen, you don't really expect to win just because the machine is so strong there."
Yeah.
And I thought that you did actually have quite a showing. Did you feel firsthand sort of the power of the machine, of the sort of built-in permanent Board of Education electoral system that's been put in place?
100%.
Partly with the,
100%. I mean, it was just me running. Like, I had a group of friends who were helping me, but they had, so Shebra Evans, who was the incumbent, had a whole bunch of people. She was union-backed. And so she had mailers going out. She had people doing phone bank. Like, she had a lot of people behind her. And then on the other side, Laura Stewart, who, like, please God, do not elect that woman, but she probably will be elected because she's supported by the unions. So she had people tabling for her outside of every single polling station. I mean, how can you compete with that? And yet I came within, you know, not that much of Shebra Evans. But it's just you can't fight against the power of this organizing machine.
And this is what's so frustrating and maddening is that you represented what school board elections are supposed to be.
Yeah.
Not a permanent career politician, not somebody with a radical political agenda that gets in the way of the basics of actually, as you said, making sure kids have a good education and learn and read to write and are actually in a safe school. You're just a mom who said, "Hey, I want to make a difference," and it's like David and Goliath, except Goliath wins.
Yeah. I don't know how. You know, I don't know how to beat this. It's funny because people were talking about, you know, the power of money and in campaigns, and I said, well, no, the power of unions. That's the real.
Well, hold that thought. I have an idea of how we can make a difference and change things around. And also there's more in Bethany's life that she's been working on and advocating for while still raising her children. So we're glad to have her back, and we're going to pick her brain on a couple of those things, too, and we'll get to it in a moment.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
It's Larry O'Connor alongside Bethany Mandel this morning. By the way, for people who are like, you know, sending me messages saying, "Oh, you shouldn't say you have a crush on another woman. That's disrespectful to Meredith." Trust me, Meredith fully approves of my crush on Bethany Mandel. And frankly, Meredith has her own tiny little crush on Bethany, too. So it's all in the family. Everything's fine here. Bethany, you just said, you know, I don't know what we can do against this insurmountable teachers union. Here's what we can do. We can actually get as organized and involved and have our own little, you know, we need to do what the left has done with school boards. Conservatives, not even conservatives, non-radical leftists have ignored school board elections for decades. It's going to take us a while to get there, but just like we have political action committees who are interested and focused on certain issues, and they raise money and they spend that money wisely on political races to make sure that their agenda gets heard in the public sphere, we conservatives or non-radical leftists need to do the exact same thing with education. For too long, Republicans have ignored these local elections. We've just sort of taken our, well, that's not important. That's not going to make a difference. And frankly, as I say all the time, what happens in your house is more important than what happens in the White House. If conservative groups spent 10% of what they spend every 4 years on a presidential election and spent it on school board elections, we would make a huge difference. And we've got to recognize how important these are. The left certainly has recognized how important these elections are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to raise money as a school board candidate. I raised probably more than almost anyone else. And yet, I mean, it was not nearly enough. And it's hard to make that ask of people, especially in this Biden economy, to say, can you please donate so I can send a text message? But those text messages were the reason why I came within, so close of the incumbent. If I had had more money, I could have done a lot more. And so there's still good people running for Montgomery County School Board. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who I choose on air.
You can express your opinion, sure.
Brenda Diaz is like the only hope running right now in Montgomery County, and so everyone should go to her website and donate to her, because if you want anyone sane on Montgomery County Board of Education, it's only going to be Brenda Diaz.
All right, there you go. And of course, Brenda Diaz's opponent is welcome to come on and tell us otherwise. Bethany, you were also focused quite a bit this year, as any righteous American would be, on the events in Israel after October 7th, because of your position in the media and your husband's position in the media, Seth Mandel. You were also actually able to communicate and work with a lot of groups and a lot of organizations and a lot of directly victims whose family members were being held hostage or they were victims of October 7th. If you could, I mean, just sort of, where do things stand right now? To me, I think it is one of the greatest scandals in American media that we don't have a daily discussion of American and Israeli hostages that are still being held, still being sexually assaulted, still being tortured.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild to me that the five American hostages are not household names. Yeah. So I've helped probably half a dozen families in big ways and small ways. I would probably put it about a dozen total, and all sorts of outcomes. I would say like 4 or 5 of them had as happy endings as possible. Their families were returned in the November ceasefire. A couple of them, we found out that they had died on October 7th, or they were killed afterwards in captivity in Gaza. And then I have a couple of, families that I consider to be close friends at this point, who they still have their families being held. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel right now. Yeah. Hamas just recently, I think it was yesterday, said no to the latest Biden ceasefire agreement that everyone had agreed to, and that Hamas had agreed to the terms in a previous round of ceasefire negotiations. Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately Hamas wants to stay in power, and Israel will not let that happen, and that's an intractable.
And that seems pretty obvious, considering the charter of Hamas is to eliminate the Jewish state of Israel off the face of the map. And yet, for some reason, people either delude themselves or try to delude us by saying, oh, no, we can work with and negotiate. What should the stance of the American government be at this point? Because they still, I couldn't even tell you exactly what the Biden administration's position is on the status of this war.
So the problem is the Biden administration, every time these talks break down, they see, and they're correct, they see the only party in this negotiation process willing to budge anywhere is Israel. So they put the pressure on Israel to budge and budge and budge and budge and budge. But that sends a message to Hamas that every single time there's a negotiation, if it falls through, they can extract more and more and more concessions from Israel. And then when they start the negotiation round again, they've started in an even better position. And so what should be happening is the Biden administration should be putting unrelenting pressure on Qatar and on Hamas. And we should be making public demands of Qatar to expel Hamas leadership. There have been reports of that happening and them being sent to Iraq, but that has not happened yet. We should be freezing assets. We should be aggressively only targeting one party in these negotiations, and that is Hamas, and that hasn't really happened.
It hasn't happened, and whenever any sort of official statement is being made by Blinken or by the White House or by President Biden himself, it's impossible not to shoot what they're saying through the lens of domestic politics and elections going on here. There is no true North Star. There's no moral compass here guiding the decisions, and that's it's sad, but it's also incredibly destructive. And by the way, we'll talk about that quite a bit with Katie McFarland coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. And there's more to discuss with Bethany. She's been up to a lot, important, critical things. In fact, a recent trip to abroad as well, and we'll talk about that later in the program. Right now, though, it's 5:24.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:37 as we're plowing forward here on this Thursday morning, the 27th day of June. It's debate day, and we're going to be discussing that and strategies for both candidates, if you still think it's going to happen. And by the way, what's CNN been doing for their debate prep? Well, we'll give you some insight there, too. Also, at 7:05, Mark Chenoweth. He was on the losing side of that decision yesterday involving the First Amendment and the federal government's ability to use proxies to silence your speech. We'll speak with the lawyer who argued that case coming up at 7:05. 7:35, Betsy DeVos, former Trump Education Secretary. And then 8:05, KT McFarland, former Deputy National Security Director on national security issues and the war in Israel. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Bethany Mandel, sitting in here as a special appearance. Good to have you, Bethany.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Are you doing okay? Because I know how much you loved having Jamaal Bowman in Congress, and what a inspirational figure he was, and what a stunning and shocking defeat yesterday. Actually, we have a special song for the moment. Yeah, because we're honestly...
You knew I love to dance when I come and guest host.
This gives me hope in the world when Democrats can stand up and say, yeah, we're bad, but we're not that crazy. And they say goodbye to Jamaal Bowman.
So Jamaal Bowman is hysterically still blaming AIPAC for his loss. It's just the infusion.
Well, listen, some tropes die hard, man. And let's just be clear here. AIPAC did put money into this race for his opponent, but it was only after Bowman was down by like 10 points, I think, in a poll. And AIPAC said, well, and AOC and Bernie Sanders were trying to rally money to sort of help Bowman pull it out. That's when AIPAC stepped in. Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand the strategizing, the strategery of standing behind Bowman when he was for sure going to lose. My favorite thing was AOC's tweet about him, about son of a single mother.
Let's go to that.
Housing.
She sent this out with a picture of her gazing up at him like he's, like Ronald Reagan or something. I get that Ronald Reagan, like he's her father or maybe husband. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
And go ahead and do the dramatic reading of what she put on her tweet.
So happy to. Son of a single mother, grew up in public housing, dedicated his life to teaching, became a school principal, founded a prized school to serve Bronx youth, elected as the first black congressman for New York 16. And then there was a community note. That is not true.
Yeah.
He was not the first black American.
No.
Never took a dime in corporate money. A true public servant. And also an anti-Semite. And And this is how we got here.
Also an unconvicted felon for pulling that fire alarm in the middle of a congressional vote.
There were so many great memes about his loss with the fire alarm. I thought it was so great.
Couple things on that, by the way. You're right. Community Note had to point out that no, he's not the first black American to represent New York 16. In fact, he is the third black African American. Let's not forget Charlie Rangel, just recently, a giant in the House of Representatives, represented the same district, and another African American represented the district back in the 60s. Also, this is actually my favorite part. She tagged the wrong Jamaal Bowman on Twitter. On that tweet, she did the little @ Jamaal Bowman so that he could see it all. And she loves him so much and respects him so much, and she's such a close personal friend that the intern that runs her social media accounts tagged the wrong person. That's how intimate and personal this was.
But it's wild to me because he was already down by 17 points before AIPAC ever got into it. Yeah. And there's this Twitter account. I don't even know it. I don't know if you know it. Dear White Staffers, and it's I don't know who it is, but it's just angry staffers on the Hill.
Oh, okay.
And it's like social justice, whatever. Like these people who do their jobs behind their masks because God forbid they actually put their names behind anything they're saying. Mm-hmm. And so these tweets were sent an hour apart. AIPAC spent $17 million to keep a black man out of the United States Congress. An hour prior to that tweet, they send a tweet, F. Richie Torres. Richie Torres is a fantastic black congressman in a nearby district. So who is super duper pro-Israel to the point where, like, I've met him multiple times and he goes to the local Jewish schools just to hang out. He's there apparently every week. I've heard from parents at those schools.
He's one of the few normal, rational Democrats from New York.
Yeah. So that you're totally allowed to primary him, but you're not allowed to primary Jamaal Bowman. Some black men are you can put
more
a target
equal than
on.
others. Yeah.
Yep.
In cut 4 here, you'll hear Jamaal Bowman in his concession speech continue, and listen to all of the dog whistles here. Tell me you're an anti-Semite without just coming out and saying you're an anti-Semite. Here, listen.
We should not be well adjusted to a sick society.
Sick society. A society that doesn't elect him as a sick society.
Outraged. We should be outraged when a super PAC of dark money can spend $20 million to brainwash people into believing something that isn't true.
All right, let's stop it there. First of all, I love that dark money has just been redefined as any political money I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. Now it's just dark. It's dark. But boy, so it's AIPAC, of course, is who he's talking about, which is a completely open and transparent political action government. It has a simple idea that we should respect and strengthen the bonds of the American government and the Israeli government. That I'm okay with that, number one. But number two, the money was spent to what now, Bethany? Brainwash people. Mm-hmm. Because those rich, evil Jews will brainwash you.
Yeah, the money was just spent making Jews aware of who was representing them. Yeah. And it worked very well. The get out the vote in this Jewish community was superb. And it is a model for taking down Cori Bush, for example, taking down AOC, because they were able to get in those synagogues and be like, y'all, there's some stuff. You should really register and get out the vote.
We're going to get to the Cori Bush race in just a moment because that is not looking good for could see 2 squad members going down in this primary season. And also one other thing, that the Jews in the district that Jamaal Bowman represents, you're right, they actually woke up and came out and vote. And what was Jamaal Bowman's response? He went to a rally in the South Bronx, which is actually not in the district. So, it's 5:44. Bye-bye, Jamaal Bowman. We are going to miss you, but we are excited to see your debut on CNN or MSNBC or wherever you end up. That'll be cool. But what about other races? You mentioned Cori Bush. Now, the polling on Cori Bush's district is hard to get a hold of. There's one poll from February that shows Cori Bush losing to her primary opponent by double digits. There's another poll from January that showed Cori Bush winning by double digits, but that same poll now just came back this week. Politico is reporting on it. This is the Remington Research poll that shows, this latest poll is the, well, you don't care what poll it is. It shows, who cares? It's actually by it's a group called Democrat Majority. A DMFI. This one shows Bush's 17-point lead that she had in January now reversed. And her opponent, Derek Bell, is actually 1 point ahead of Cori Bush. So this primary is coming up. And either way, this would be another squad member that would lose in a Democrat primary. It's beautiful because they're in districts that are protected. You win the primary and you've won the general election in these districts.
So what's funny is I think that Jamaal Bowman, I think, lost because of the Jewish vote. But unfortunately for Cori Bush in Missouri, people like Jews, especially in the Bible Belt.
Yeah,
and so
very much.
your seat is not guaranteed, even if you don't have an excessive number of Jews in your.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Not only like Jews, but also like the fact that Israel has been a critically important ally, is the only functioning democracy in a region that requires an ally for the United States, and we can count on Israel. I would like to say that Israel can count on us as well. Even if you take the religious and faith-based component out of it and you're not an anti-Semite, just by pure political, geo-national reasons, we should support the state of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just a litmus test of common decency. And if you are faced with an October 7th and you have on one side folks who are brutalizing an entire civilian population and taking them hostage, including a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old who are still being held hostage, and 12 women. And then on the other side, you have the folks who are applauding that terrorist action. It says a lot about you who you sympathize with. It says a lot about who you are as a person and who you are as a legislator.
Bethany, I'm seeing a lot of Democrats, though, who are now distancing themselves from Jamaal Bowman, not because he's an anti-Semite, but because he's a loser. You always right. And they're saying, well, listen, at least the Democrats, we primary out our extremists, and our establishment doesn't rally around them. Last I checked, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, the top person in the House for the Democrats, he put out robocalls this last weekend on behalf of Jamaal Bowman. So, I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is sort of attached to this, isn't he?
So I know Hakeem Jeffries' uncle. Here's a little factoid for you this morning at 5:52 this morning. My very first college class was at City College of New York. It's a public school in Upper Manhattan. And I took a class called Ancient Africa. And I wanted to learn about ancient Africa.
Nice.
And you know what I instead learned about?
What?
How the Washington Monument was built in order for the white man to try to, I guess, like, make I'm really trying with the FCC regulations and cognizant of the fact that people have their children in the background getting ready in the morning.
Thank you.
The size and shape of
it's
the
a
Washington
phallic symbol.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a phallic symbol. And it's a way for the white man to imagine themselves of the same stature more
potent and endowed like the black man?
Yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
This was your college class.
Yes.
Was he flirting with you? Was he like...
Well, so it was a whole class, right? There was like 35, 40 people in the class. He looked around the class. I was the only person of my skin tone in the class. And then he saw a Jewish star around my neck. I was like sitting in the middle of the class. Mm-hmm. He snakes through the whole room, stands right in front of my desk, and then spends the rest of the class talking about how the Jews control the slave trade and how the Jews did this and how the Jews did that. And Hakeem Jeffries has praised his uncle before.
Sure.
So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in the Jeffries family. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind as they're thinking about extremists and the Democratic Party and Jamaal Bowman. Yeah. Maybe he wasn't an extremist. Maybe he wasn't an outlier. Maybe he was mainstream.
Maybe he reflected where the Democrats are these days. Just maybe.
Just maybe.
5:54.